Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining the last session of the day, and thank you for making it this far. I will be the moderator for this panel, and for those who may have missed my introduction earlier on, I am the Chief Marketing Officer at Fiddler AI. I am joined by a passionate and diverse group of panelists in terms of industry, where their companies are at with LLMs, and how they are approaching AI in general. Vida Williams is the Chief Branding and Digital Officer at Virginia Alcoholic Beverage Control Authority. For those not familiar, Virginia ABC is a retailer, wholesaler, and regulator of distilled spirits. As a revenue generating agency of the Commonwealth, Virginia ABC does not rely on state funding. Peter Bailey, joining us from Canberra in Australia, is the ML engineering lead for search and recommendations at Canva. Radhika Venkatraman is a senior advisor at Cerberus Capital Management and chairperson of the board at LiveEarth. Vida, Peter, and Radhika, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. Okay, let's jump right in. I'm very excited with how fun this conversation is going to be because we bring such different perspectives. All of you bring such different perspectives to the table. Okay, so question for everyone. And the question is NLP tasks, chatbots, summarizations, content generation, content reviews, there's prompting, there's RAG, there's fine-tuning. On the other side of the matrix, you have large language models, small language models, open source, closed source, internal use case, external use case. There is a lot going on across different departments, across different companies. So where are you at? What use cases have you deployed? And which ones are on the roadmap to be deployed? Vida, should we start with you?
Sure. Because it's interesting when we first started talking about this topic, I walked into Virginia ABC, and of course they're an authority, but they're still associated with a state agency. And so the development of the practice of data is still in its earliest stages. It's still in that space of defining the possibility of the data and making sure that there is fidelity in the data. And I think what is interesting is there are more often than not, that is the place, the starting place where many of us are having the conversation about AI. Now, I get to juxtapose that, however, with the fact that I'm an advisor on a very large scale education project that just has volumes of data, especially post-COVID data. And in that particular case, we are already in the space of culling data, hypothesizing regarding the context, strategically looking at the different questions, organizing the data, running, using machine learning to run simulations of the hypothesis, and thus preparing for testing and training in AI. And so looking at those two things almost daily, simultaneously, is a little bit of cognitive dissonance, especially in the context that we're in, as your question so wonderfully put, where there's a whole world of data practices happening. So I'm kind of in that moment of both and some days I can even keep it straight.
Makes sense. It is pretty overwhelming. Peter, how is it at Canva?
I think, yes, overwhelming is a great description. So in terms of the prompting with context, the retrieval augmented generation and fine tuning, we're doing all of those types of deployment. So it's part of our product experience with the Magic Studio release in October. For example, prompting with context is used by our Magic Write feature. The RAG approach is used as part of our Magic Designs feature. And fine-tuning is being used as part of our Magic Media feature. And there's plenty more in that Magic Studio release of different things being used in different kinds of ways. And some are very much the experience of that feature, whereas others are sort of more embedded or supportive of an experience. One other thing that we've been finding interesting as well is maybe just using LLMs to sort of fast track prototyping internally. So it may not actually go out to a product experience, but allows us to explore some alternatives and ideas very quickly, and that's been another kind of accelerating, enabling ability with the use of this technology internally.
Makes sense. On that note, Peter, between internal and external use case, where you just said internal prototyping versus maybe an external experience, we just ran a poll, and the audience is at about 44% say that right now they are looking at LLM applications for internal use cases. Um, Radhika, how about you?
All right. First of all, thank you for having us. It's a pleasure to be here. I'll give you two perspectives, one from what I'm seeing in the companies that I advise, and a little bit of what we're doing in our own startup. From where I sit for companies that we advise, I think what I'm seeing is that almost everybody is at least dabbling in it. So there is hardly any company that is not attempting to do it. Unlike in previous rounds of technology, where you may have people waiting to see whether they want to be a slow follower or not, at least there is tremendous interest and everybody is tipping their toe. I would call them as AI tinkerers. And so I would say there's almost 90+% AI tinkering going on. In terms of going to production, I would say it's not that big a number. Okay. I would say the marketing and the sales team, and wherever you can repurpose content, regenerate content, reuse content, you're seeing a lot of early adoption. But when it comes to the real core applications, such as contact center or technician productivity and so on, people are actually attempting to build those applications as we speak, either with partners or with hyperscalers in combination with do it themselves. In my own little startup company, I would say we're looking at how to integrate generative AI for geospatial analytics at scale. That's a little bit harder problem than text repurposing, because it's not only data, it's streaming data that is geotemporal in nature. And so that's something we're just prototyping.
Right. Yeah, a couple of our polls from earlier sessions as well indicated the same thing, that this is it's between the exploration stage to having something in place already, whether it's LLMs or LLM applications. And then there was a decent level of a percentage that said that they do have observability in place as well. But still, it's not the majority, as you said, Radhika. Vida, you have been quoted as, "My goal is to create an infrastructure for economic development, community engagement, and customer service in ways that provide access as well as public safety and responsibility." In what ways do you see LLMs and generative AI helping you achieve your vision?
So I think for me, this is a question of historical continuum, right? So a lot of us believe that this kind of use case for large scale data happened right now, or happened, in the past 20 years, where humans are impacted by decisions that are happening with data. And I can make an entire argument that actually it was probably back in 1896 when, the treatise was published. The actuarial treatise was published that declared who was going to be eligible, right? Who was at good risk financially, who was a good risk for coverage. Like, those are the first vestiges that we get of data really looking at human interaction, human condition, ecological and environmental interactions, and declaring the quality of human life, right? Now, if we fast forward and we look during the heyday of, we're just starting to do facial recognition, right? Which is another very early tool set for, hey, we can do this automatically. And we're looking at broad mishandling of facial recognition as it has to do with recognizing faces. When it looks at the diversity of recognition. Now we're here, and we are in just this explosive and expansive moment of, we have now the volumes of data that are representing humans. And I think that's what is so amazing to me, is that we are now able to kind of record and see and touch and feel and experience human interaction at a very intimate level. But I don't know that we are interpreting that as an industry, that that's really what we're doing. I think we might be still bordering on tech for tech's sake. Like, whoa, it's exciting that we can run this model. And so my goal kind of in what I do and how I'm choosing products, on one hand, as I just explained, I'm literally looking at the intersection of retailing um, and controlled substances. So when you think about that, right, retailing a controlled substance and having to intersect that with the health and safety of a community, or on the exact opposite end of the spectrum, we have volumes of data. How can we more concretely look at the dynamic levers required to ensure that we're hitting educational standards? And that's a very dynamic. And at this point, because of the volume of data, we can do so with a sensitivity to include dynamic lever pulling, if you will, right? Decision making, but only if we're willing to take a step back and consider with a great deal of empathy and sensitivity the context through which we are looking at these human interactions. If we decontextualize them, then we cannot do it at all. And especially when we're talking about large language models, we have to really consider how we use the systems of language to communicate with one another and whether those models are reflecting all of the nuances in the languages that we use. And that's just a very small sliver of that, but it becomes exacerbated after that. And so for me, how do I see LLMs and AI achieving my vision? I think it's going to depend on whether we are willing as an industry and as corporations who are innovating in these spaces to take a step back and ask, who and how are we affecting who and how we're affecting them? And I think that we're in that moment where we can ask and act on that question. And some of us just need to be bold enough to do it.
Right. Yeah. I think adding to this whole dimensionality is also where we talk about large and small language models, if you will, and what's within the organization and what isn't. And it's as though we would need vertical specific um, um, uh, applications as well, right? I know that we're talking about domain specific has already entered the terminology, but our vocabulary, but we need to probably think about this in terms of societal good from a not-for-profit perspective, and then from a profit perspective as well. Yeah, so that's really interesting. There's so much that we can say there. Fiddler's mission itself is build trust into AI. So it's really fascinating to hear everything that you just said. On the top three metrics, so moving on to the ROI piece of this panel. So in terms of metrics that you think about that are important to your organizations with respect to LLM use cases, what are the top three that come to mind? And how do you define ROI for these use cases? Peter, how about we start with you?
Yeah, fantastic question. The like Canva's mission, for those who don't know it, is to empower the world to design. So we look at metrics broadly that are indicative of that that mission. So are we succeeding in the number of publications that people are able to complete, and the levels of product engagement more generally? In terms of ROI, I think it's more complex, especially at this early stage of design AI. We do look at things like utility metrics in the search discovery parts of the user's design journey, which I'm sort of specifically familiar with. And we can think of this broadly as kind of a trade-off between success versus effort. And there's also more subtle questions about people's sense of satisfaction or delight, or conversely frustration or annoyance when things go wrong. And it's just not really always easy to quantify these more sort of subjective measures, kind of at scale manner. So yeah, I think it's sort of deeply early stages, but overall we'd be saying, are we finding these technologies additive overall for the customer experience and their ability to get their designing goals met?
That sounds That sounds great. We have questions coming in from our poll where the top three metrics that are tying for first place is cost savings, operational efficiency, and innovation and competitive advantage. So our question was, what are the top three ROI areas that would be most beneficial to you? Um, Radhika, what are your thoughts on this question?
I will not repeat what was already said in the poll. I think most people would be thinking about ROI not very differently than any traditional ROI. But I think there's a few different things I would like still keep in mind, right? I recently heard a professor that said one person's automation is another person's augmentation. And so, what does that really mean? Basically, if you are able to take the new and the not so good workers and make them all very good, then you should, by definition, get productivity. Now, if you're very good, you may be a little bit upset that you made everybody else as good as you. But in general, I think, this could be a great equalizer. Does that mean you get more productivity or you get more output and therefore you can get more revenue? I think that's a very open and big question, if you will. The other thing I would say is look, throughout humanity, whether you take like the first industrial revolution or where we are right now, uh, every time a new technology was introduced, there was always a big brouhaha that, like, there's doom and gloom. But the economic study of every revolution has shown that the new technology has more good than evil, if you will. So if you believe that to be true, I think the same could apply now too.
That's a great take, and I love the line that you just shared from the professor. I'm gonna start using it as well. Um, uh, Vida, how about yourself?
So I'm gonna take this one on slightly different because I tend to be on innovative products. And so right now, I would say in the area of education, the biggest use cases that we have before us are as follows. Um, we are very adept at predicting the success or not of a student's pathway. That those models, I think, have been minted. What I am fascinated by is the potential for the volume of data that we now have available to us to show us dimensions wherein that prediction can be altered or changed. Right. And I think that that is, to me, the big success or the ROI on that. Because if you can actually change the model from being a hardened prediction to being dynamic based on dimensions, especially in the areas of education and healthcare, then we can actually increase the quality of life. We can increase the quality of experience. We can increase the quality of XYZ, right? And so for me, especially in this particular case, it is the ROI is determining that we can figure out what dimensions, which features in their composite could actually change a prediction from being providence to being a dynamic set of pathways. And I think that that is the evolution of personalization, right? And it's an evolution of personalization that takes the mitigation of bias that we've had to deal with for so long, it moves it to productive understanding of context. And I think those things together, while very complex, are going to give us a new scale for return on investment, especially in core areas like education and healthcare.
Yeah, that's super interesting. There's so much value to be seen across just a multitude of industries and how it can shape humanity and accelerate
Yeah.
humanity's values, not just progress and innovation, but actually values as well, right? The actual
I think
values that we hold dear to our hearts and what we want to pass on as well.
yeah.
Uh, there's a nice question from the audience. So, speaking of ROI for LLMs in your own businesses, did you build an LLM or use available models and integrate them? And it's a two-part question. So, how did you make the decision of whether you were building your own or you were basically going to buy? So, is it build or buy? And are you building an LLM that's available, or using available models and integrating them? I think, Peter, this would be a nice one for you.
So certainly to date, we've been buying rather than building, but the sort of trade-off between looking at where the value lies in the sort of specific use cases for what we're seeking to do, and the availability of appropriate data to build that in the context of design AI is stuff that we continue to investigate deeply. Probably won't speak much more than that on this one.
Radhika, any thoughts from you?
I think the notion of build is actually more complex when it comes to generative AI than it has been in previous versions of technology. Part of the reason is the cost of training, the cost of inference. And so it requires like tremendous amount of expertise. Everywhere that I see, people are buying, or rather I would say trying many before they hone in on who to buy or what to buy. But I have not seen too many companies say they want to build. There are a handful, and I won't name them over here, that we all hear about. They're very large companies. They generally have the ability to do many years of patient investing. But if you're anything less than very large, I think people have been looking to buy.
Right. Yep, makes sense. Vida, how is it working out at Virginia ABC?
So Virginia ABC, we're not close enough to the quandary, is what I would say, to have made that decision to use or buy. What I would follow along with the comments that have been made is buying is probably going to be where we would start that process. The question then becomes, which aspect are we looking at harvesting, right? Is it controlled substance? Is it community health and wellness? Is it retailing? Is it some cross dimension of them all? So that's where I would suggest that's where we would start there, pretty clearly.
Right. Peter, one of the things that you said a few minutes ago was one of Canva's values is to be a force for social good. And what impact does it have on Canva's capabilities when users opt out of having their data used for training? And so how do you balance the need for high quality data with the ethical considerations, right? Right, I was talking a little bit about that as well. So how does Canva balance the need for high quality data with the ethical considerations around data privacy and user consent?
So Melanie Perkins, our CEO, put it really well recently, saying that we need to ensure all our AI is ethical and also feels ethical. We believe in giving our customers control over their data and the privacy of that data, and also that it is possible to create world-leading AI capabilities with that privacy and consent in place. And so we've rolled out those customer controls. We're also working with our creators community, who provide huge amounts of content that populate Canva's template and media libraries, to make sure that we can fairly compensate those that consent to having their content used to train our AI systems. We won't train AI models on creator or user design content without their permission, period. And our hope is to be able to be very global here so that we can be representing many different languages and cultures and ways of approaching design for visual communication. So I think it really becomes a question of what data do we need for specific first-party ML model training or fine-tuning of third-party ML models? And then do we have enough of that? And if not, how should we go about obtaining it? There's nearly always ways to obtain data, but it's a question of how you go about obtaining that data and how you compensate and communicate it. One thing that's been pretty exciting, I guess, over the last 2-3 years, and I sort of worked on this at Microsoft as well, is this emerging recognition of the ability to use multimodal LLMs to both create synthetic data and annotate it at a level that's pretty much compatible to human annotators for at least baseline quality. model development and evaluation. And again, that's for particular kinds of tasks that are amenable to this approach. So, not all tasks you can get that kind of synthetic creation. And some of my old colleagues from Microsoft actually recently wrote a paper about this, which is up on Archive, if you're interested in reading up more on this topic. So certainly in the kind of information retrieval, relevance annotation world, I think there's kind of emerging recognition. It's a doable thing to get really high quality annotation.
Nice. Do you know the name of the paper, Peter? Because we could post it in the chat so that our audience can look it up.
I'll dig it up and post it for you. Yeah, I can find it quickly.
Okay, great. So yeah, I guess the trust and safety team at Canva is really staying busy, right? With everything that they're working on, your different product lines as well. I think there's Magic Studio and then also Canva Creator, as you said. Follow-up question, Peter, from the audience. How do you think about data and business model privacy, given buy may also be sharing / leaking aspects of business?
Yeah, I guess you obviously want to think carefully about your contractual relationship with your model providers and be really clear about what the terms and conditions of the interactions look like. So that's a kind of risk, standard contractual risk that you need to understand and be clear about. Certainly something we take very seriously. So yes, there are risks, but I think they're manageable.
Got it. Radhika, you have worked at mega large companies, right? Credit Suisse, Verizon, to name a few. You have you're consulting with startups. You are advising other companies as well on their AI journey. So for these large companies, whether they are regulated or non-regulated, how are they looking at generative AI in the context of their applications, whether it's mission critical applications or just business critical applications? We've seen throughout this summit and from the poll that just happened that organizations right now are still looking at the internal use case. So whatever the context of these applications may be, how are they looking at this?
Right. So number of things, right? First of all, if you're a large enterprise, then some of the topics we touched on, data privacy becomes extremely important. Having guardrails around risk and compliance and all of that becomes important. Nobody is allowing any application to go to production without at least a human having validated it. So it has to be some kind of a human oversight for it. But equally important is when they start buying models, they need to be able to, be able to trace, if you will, copyright. Otherwise, what is the indemnification around that itself? The most important question that keeps coming up is nobody who is running a large application that is affecting their mission critical processes wants to send all of their data outside their security perimeter. So when that starts to happen, the question is, do you run it in a VPC dedicated to you, or do you start to run it on premise? So you may be buying somebody's model, but you may still be wanting to host it on-prem. So for the peripheral use cases, which does not require a lot of customer data, PII data, and all of that, people are still comfortable using cloud-based applications without such strict rigor, if you will. But if it's healthcare, if it is financial services or telecom, they're all looking at VPC as well as, on-prem deployments with a lot of ability to trace not just training data, but also making sure none of their data goes into the base model itself.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think it was I can't remember if it was in Lucas's session or it was in another session, but Lucas is the CEO of Weights and Biases, and he was talking about how when he speaks to executives, at least in very tech-forward companies, they are still quite skeptical of how LLMs could definitely be helping them. And it's in these very large enterprises where you see that these use cases are really emerging. And the use cases are emerging. Sure, you have to balance it with all these other concerns as well. But there is definitely that drive to move forward with innovation.
Yeah. I mean, this is probably where companies like Fiddler could be really helpful. Even when you have models that are not Gen AI, one had to regularly do model risk management and all of those compliant features. You got to share with the Fed and the SEC and everybody. So with LLMs, I cannot imagine people just saying, I just ran it for my risk processes and don't have like the full traceability of it.
Right. Right. Yep. Um, what are some use case implementations? This is an audience question. Which use cases implementation will indicate that generative AI has turned the corner from hype into mainstream? Radhika, any thoughts?
Um, to me, I think there's like two different indicators. One is whether you can start to embed AI in all your processes. Like when we started to talk about AI, ML, and so on, even before Gen AI, it was always like one center of excellence and one department doing it on behalf of everybody until everybody started implementing some level of machine learning in each and every one of the processes, whether it is front office, middle office, back office, it did not matter. So that level of ubiquity, I think, will start happening with generative AI being embedded in the workflows. Then the second is it's not just going to be these very large companies that can afford it. It has to become enough affordable that everyone can use it. Because right now we've all seen the product market fit from a consumer perspective. You can ask ChatGPT, it'll give you answers. But is it that ubiquitous when you go to work? Can you ask something in your company and get all of your answers? It just has to become like search, in my opinion.
Right. Yeah. Krishna actually brought that up in the same chat with Lucas, that LLMs are a little bit akin to the search model in its early days. Vida, you would have a very interesting perspective, I would imagine, on this question. Would love to hear your thoughts.
I was gonna say because I appreciated and loved Radhika's perspective. I think mine is almost at the other end of the spectrum. All of those things have to be true that she said, and we have to see and acknowledge that there's an entire generation doing something different with it. Because that is how we're going to move from it just being search capable to actually being able to see full scale innovation, automation, and things that we could not have predicted. And so it's interesting if you just do a quick search on Google, YouTube, or whatever your search mechanism is, and you go, hey, how do I do XYZ in AI or ChatGPT or whatever you want to say? And you start seeing 16 and 14-year-olds show up to give you a tutorial, now we're starting to know that we're heading towards a different design aesthetic, right? So yes, all of the corporations, all of the innovators, all of us with gray hair have to set a very firm foundation from which we're gonna really use AI. However, it's going to be watching what is happening in the generations, that we are mentoring, that we are mentors to, and seeing how they are using it. And I'll end with this. When I saw a 16-year-old-ish boy in 15 minutes, write a cancer diagnostic tutorial in AI, I knew exactly that we have not even tipped the iceberg of what we're actually going to be able to do with this technology. So yes, and for me, it's that.
Right. Being really responsible about it, right?
That's definitely
absolutely, like it has to be embraced as a cultural value within organizations, but it's nearly like it needs to be embraced as a societal value.
yes. And I have another ending segment for that, but I'll stop.
Go ahead, Vida, if you want to. We have time, so if you want to say a few more words.
Because I think right now we are kind of locked in the corporate aspect of it. It's almost reminiscent of the 1990s tech for tech boom, right? Before we realized that technology itself wasn't a business model, that just because you could do it didn't mean you were going to be able to make money out of it. And so we had to go through that, I think, and we had to learn through that before we could get to where we are now, which is using technology ubiquitously, in order to be able to undergird all of the industries. I think data's in that space as well. But the difference, I think the slight difference, or maybe it is a clear difference, is that if we do not fully appreciate that people are willingly, sometimes unwillingly, giving you their interaction models from which you're making decisions using AI or other technologies, then we're misunderstanding that we're making decisions that also feed back in that feedback loop against them or impact them. And so I think when we're looking at the Algorithmic Accountability Act of 2019, when we're looking at the current executive order that Biden just signed, we need to, from a societal perspective, really advance our definitions of these terms, adapt a Bill of Rights akin to the Hippocratic Oath, and make sure that those of us who are in the industry understand that we are working with human interaction data, with environmental impact data, with those things, so that as we're building, as the 16-year-old is doing these models, that they're doing so already conversant in accountability, responsibility, et cetera, to do no harm. So that's where I think we who are setting the foundation need to put our focus, so that they, as they're coming up, have a firm foundation from which to build what is going to be magical for a long time, I think, before we become scientific again.
That's a great word, magical. I like that. And yes, businesses have to take the lead in as well, right, in defining what this responsibility is going to look like.
I think so.
Yeah. Okay, so a question for all of you. On your AI journey, what is the one learning and or piece of advice, whether it's technical, business, whatever you think stands out the most, you would like to share not only with the audience, but also with the fellow panelists here? So, Radhika, how about we start with you?
Okay. I think there is quite a lot of fear around AI, but my belief set is that AI assisted humans are going to be better off than non-AI assisted humans. And therefore, like, don't wait to get started. Be that inspiring leader who can unlock discretionary effort of everyone around you.
Love it. Vida?
I would say to remember that engineering and technology and data is an art form. It is a creative medium, and that is why is forming the basis of innovation today. And so remain insanely curious, remain exceptionally humble, but try it all and fail furiously fast, so that we can learn that lesson and get to the actual, right answer, whatever that might be.
Yep,
Yeah.
love it. Peter, your thoughts?
Possibly the thing that I keep continuing to learn, I think it's a little bit similar to Vida's, is that the more I learn about anything, whether it's like responsible AI or generative LLMs or how products get delivered for real versus, public perceptions of them, the more I just continue to realize I have even more to learn. Moving to Canva from Microsoft a couple of years ago, I really felt like things sped up a lot. But then seeing what's gone on in the industry in the last 18 to 24 months with AI, I just feel like the entire tech industry and the business community and the general public are all just on this very accelerated learning path at the moment. And it's like the finding out of that is like, it's okay to feel like you don't know everything or even much of anything. There's a great quote from Satya Nadella, which I'm going to paraphrase, which is actually, it's better to be able to learn as much as you can rather than a know-it-all. And just kind of closing on that one of the things that struck me is like, for those of us who work with this technology, we often know a lot about it and we make assumptions that other people have the same perceptions that we do and the same lot of learning. And this was really brought home to me, hearing a comment from one of our team members reflecting on some customer feedback where they were complaining about some generative AI imagery that was showing up for them. Saying, why would you have this in your content library? And they clearly had made no distinguishing between what was in our library and what was being created on demand for them. So we knew that there were differences here, but they basically had no perspective that these were different things. And that's where I think this sense of like the AI changes that have been coming over the last couple of years, are they ubiquitous? No, but a big section of society already has no perceived distinction between what's an AI output and what's just other output. And I think that's a real, risk and challenge for all of us as we go about building products and delivering services in society, is that many people won't make the discrimination between the two. So, yeah, that's a challenge. And
Yeah.
That really is a great point, right? It's social media times search times huge multiplier effect. So Peter, on that note, there is a audience question on safety, on how safety is nuanced, and how do you describe it, or can you shed light on when LLMs are preferable and when predictive AI models are preferable for addressing trust and safety challenges?
Yeah, I think it's a really great question. I'm actually going to kind of quote Krishna Barrett, who talked at a CIR conference when this is several years ago, so predating most of the LLM emergence, and he was asked about Google and how they really sort of thought about what they had to do in the context of delivering search results for billions of people on the planet all the time. And he said it came down to this sort of trade-off between popularity and authority. And I think LLMs are, in some senses, an embodiment of what's popular from the data sets that they've absorbed, and sort of generative ability to create new content that effectively is popular within the input context embedding space. Where you need authoritative content as the output, then I think there's a stronger requirement to think really deeply about where and how you might integrate LLM technology, because you don't really have a guarantee that it's authoritative if you're just relying on the LLM. And the kind of responsibility comes back to you, the product or service delivery owner, to question really carefully, how critical is my answer or my content needing to be authoritative? If we're sure Vida has this all the time, if you're delivering health information, you're delivering alcohol advice, etc., you need to be authoritative. You can't just make it up, or you really shouldn't be making it up. So I think that's my take on this in terms of a safety trade-off.
Yeah, love the dimension that you used, Peter. That's really great. We could talk about this so much more. This could be another hour of discussion, I feel, in terms of the things that all of you shared over here. And those were quick answers. I know everyone had to keep it under 3 minutes, but I feel if we were to do this all over again, we could even have an hour or two of discussion. So it was really awesome. Lovely to hear your perspectives. Thank you so much for joining. We are at time. So thank you, Vida, Peter, and Radhika. And with that, we conclude the AI Forward Summit. It was a pleasure hosting each and every one of you.